Good morning. How the devil are you all doing this fine day? It's not a fine day. It's raining outside. I'm 2 shows in, and it's already like we've never been away. We've really hit the ground running this year. The second episode of our Tech Foresights show dropped yesterday and has been very well received indeed, particularly up in JCB circles, which is always nice to see. The first full episode of Demolition's Greatest Threat is also racking up the views. And earlier this morning, the latest in our series of In Conversation With shows dropped over on YouTube. I'm going to play you a snippet of that in just a bit later in the show, but if you haven't done so already, now would be a very good time to subscribe to our YouTube channel, as there's new content dropping there pretty much every day now. So, without further ado, let me roll the intro, post the question of the day, which I've remembered to do today, and get this show on the road. Welcome to the Breakfast Show. I'm your host, Mark Anthony. It is Tuesday, the 10th of January, and as that remarkably persistent guy just said, welcome to the Breakfast Show. I am your host, Mark Anthony. In today's show, DSM has set aside £1.6 million to settle its CMA fine, taking the total to almost £29 million and counting. We have a sneak preview of our conversation with rising Instagram star Ben the Operator. A Spanish demolition firm is looking to do something that Europe's best football clubs have generally failed to accomplish: complete a demolition at FC Barcelona's Camp Nou stadium. Plus, we're going to take a look at some demolition from a slightly unusual angle, and we're going to get to all of that in just a second. But first, let's see who among the rich and the shameless will be celebrating a birthday on this day of days. Happy birthday! And it's many happy returns to American outlaw Frank James, brother of Jesse, I think, and to Maggie May singer Rod Stewart, who turns 77 today. Happy birthday also to Steely Dan singer Donald Fagen, boxer and General Grill enthusiast George Foreman, and to 80s singer Pat Benatar. Love is a Battlefield is one of my all-time favourites. So many happy returns to Pat Benatar and everyone else. On with this. There was a vague hope that the Competition and Markets Authority investigation into bid rigging and collusion in the UK demolition industry might have been concluded by the end of November. November came and went, and it's still plodding along with the haste of a tortoise on its day off. Even as the CMA wheels of justice are still turning, another company has now declared the amount of money that it's set aside to settle any fines that might arise when the CMA finally makes its long-awaited pronouncement. Here's that news. DSM has become the latest company to publicly declare the provision it's made for its involvement in the bid rigging scandal uncovered by the Competition and Markets Authority. In its latest accounts, the firm says it's made a provision of £1.6 million for the full settlement of the infringement. The fines expected to be levied against the UK demolition companies named in the Competition and Markets Authority bid rigging scandal is now close to £29 million. 6 other firms have also stated the amount the CMA probe is expected to cost them. Carey's has set aside £9 million. Keltbray has set aside £6 million. McGee, £2.4 million. John F. Hunt, £5.6 million. Brown and Mason, £2.35 million. And Cantillon has earmarked a maximum of £1.9 million. 2 other companies, Squibb Group and Erith, are contesting provisional findings of the investigation. All 10 companies named in the investigation were members of the National Federation of Demolition Contractors at the time of the alleged offences. The CMA had been expected to formally announce the level of fines last November, but this is now expected to be made later this month. If you'd like to know more about the background to this story, Demolition News has produced a dedicated podcast series on the subject. You can find a link in the description below. Yeah, the fact that that's still dragging on almost 4 years after the investigation began is deeply disappointing. And the fact that the NFDC has made no real statement on the fact that all 10 of the companies named were Federation members when the alleged offences took place is pretty shameful as well. And the fines of £29 million and rising is a stain on the demolition sector's reputation. It's going to take years or even decades to rebuild the trust destroyed by the guilty parties. Now, I've just mentioned the fact that you can find out more from our podcast series. I've just pressed the button and nothing happened. So while we're playing the next video up, I'm going to go and dig that out and try that again. But in the meantime, let's go with one of these. Take a moment to say good morning to a newcomer, Peter McKenna. It says, morning, folks. Morning, Peter. Everyone that's here on a regular basis knows that if you're here for the first time, you get some welcome confetti. Peter McKenna, that is yours. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Let us know where you're watching from. Love to know where you are and what you do. So let us know that at some point in the chat if you'd be so kind. Now, for most football teams in La Liga and the Champions League, the Camp Nou Stadium in Barcelona is an impenetrable fortress. But a demolition project has finally managed to breach the defences. And if I can find the right button, I'll show you how. Going to say very quick good morning to Mark Whiting, who's just joined us. Morning, Mark. And to let you know, Peter McKenna, our newcomer, is up in Liverpool docks, demolishing sheds at Alexandria Dock with AW Demolition, our friend Austin Wilkinson, brought here by Dan Cullen. Thanks very much indeed for doing that, Dan. Just going back to the Camp Nou, I was actually lucky enough to visit the Camp Nou some years ago. Well, I say I was lucky, but there was no football actually taking place when I did the stadium tour. And to make matters even worse, some of my friends actually visited the stadium the day before me, and they got to see Ronaldinho training. I got to see a completely empty stadium, but it really is quite a facility, and it's set to become even better still once that refurbishment is over and done with. So, the youth of today, eh? They want nothing to do with the construction industry. They're lazy, work shy, and they lack ambition. They have zero work ethic and are more interested in taking offence at the slightest thing, pursuing woke initiatives, and messing about on TikTok. If you think that's the case, then I urge you to watch the following clip of my conversation with Ben Wade, better known as Ben the Operator, over on Instagram. And while you're watching this, I'm going to post a link to the full-length video. But take a look at this. You say you're looking to inspire the next generation. It's quite a bold aim for someone so young. How do you plan to do that? Is it just leading by example?
I guess in a way so, yeah. I don't think there's enough of a presence of younger operators. I think a lot of the time you'll find people that have always grown up in construction that just get along with it and it's a normal part of their life to them, whereas I try and show it off as something extra that I do. So it's not just that it's always been my life and it always will be my life. It's something, it's a skill that I've gained, and I think it's good to show it's good to show this a skill other people can also gain in the construction industry.
Yeah, it's interesting. I talk a lot about how the construction industry has generally failed to attract and engage with young people.
Mm.
If I were to hand you a magic wand,
Yeah,
because those exist. If I were to hand you a magic wand and say, "Okay, you're king of construction for a day, attract some young people into the industry," how would you go about it?
I think it first starts with the schools, really, because as much as schools do support students, I think there is a lack of education for the construction industry. I think a lot of students aren't aware of the potential in the industry. It's very much, I think school nowadays is very much university and apprenticeship focused, more so university, I think, especially at my school. As much as they are supportive, it's very much university, which is the overall aim, I feel like. And obviously, if you're going straight into university, then construction is almost left behind in a way. So I think there needs to be more emphasis on apprenticeships or even just going straight into a job. There's nothing wrong with going straight into a job after school. I think a lot of students might be fearful that they have to go to university or they have to go and get high, degrees and stuff like that.
If you can find the time to check out the full-length version of that film, I would strongly urge you to do so. It might just restore your faith in the younger generation. And if you'd like to see it, you can hop on over to our YouTube channel, or easier still, just use the link that I just posted in the chat.
Since the finance bill came into effect in April, the construction industry has seen a surge of fuel thefts. The rising cost of living has placed an additional risk of theft by employees and contractors, as well as opportunistic thieves. By using diesel dye and placing warnings of its use, you are sending a clear message that this is your fuel.
It is time to head for Sin City, and this time we're going in the company of one of the likely stars of ConExpo 2023.
Here's to the workaholics who aren't done until it's done right. We see you moving Earth, and we see ways to help you work smarter and harder. It's why we're building all Deere excavators by hand, designing a whole new way to power your fleet, and working together to have your back from dirt to rock to road. See these innovations and more at ConExpo. You won't want them to stay in Vegas. Never idle.
Yeah, I have to say, I'm really looking forward to seeing some more of that John Deere range this time around, particularly as they appear to be drawing ever closer to actually arriving here with a proper presence here in Europe. I'd also like to check out their new electric excavator, which I reported on earlier this week, assuming it's on display, of course. If you missed that, you can find details over on our YouTube channel. I seem to be pointing everybody at our YouTube channel at the moment, but I'll post a link for that in the chat right about now. But first, this. We're going to play out today with a spot of Demolition. Nothing unusual in that, I'm sure you'd agree, but the angle from which this one is shot makes the clip just a little bit more interesting. Yeah, that change of camera angle really does make all the difference, doesn't it? Now, I mentioned earlier the fact, or I mentioned yesterday actually, that we're done with Balmer for now, at least for another 2 years or thereabouts. But our friends over at Diggers and Dozers have not. In actual fact, Fred, who is moderating over in the chat today, uploaded yesterday a walk around the Bobcat stand. If you'd like to go and have a look at that, I'll get him to post a link in the chat. But you can just go over to YouTube and check out Diggers and Dozers. Make sure you subscribe while you're there. And while you're about it, subscribe to Peter Haddock, Content Media. Subscribe to Nick Drew, Digger Man Blog. Subscribe to Demolition. Just if you see something you like, just subscribe, will you? In the meantime, this.
Sorry to interrupt the guy with the funny glasses, but if you're enjoying this video, please hit the like button as it helps our channel. Or, better still, share this video with a friend or a colleague. Thank you. Right, back to Beardy.
Right, that pretty much wraps up the main part of this morning's show. I'm going to roll the outro in just a second before leaping gazelle-like over into the chat to see what you're all saying today. If you can't stick around for that, then please stay safe. Look after yourself, your family, your friends, and your colleagues. Have a great day, and thanks for watching. But if you do have the time and the inclination, I'll see you on the other side of this for what is now known as the Craic. And don't forget, if you happen to be on Instagram at 2:30 this afternoon, then please join us for Talk Tuesday, the first ever episode of Talk Tuesday, which is not dissimilar to what we've done on Instagram before, only it now has a name. I hope to see you there. But before then, it's time for the Craic. Right, let's get a bit of music playing in the background. Right, how are we? Right, I'm going to go back to the beginning of the chat, make sure we cover everybody this morning. I think first off the mark this morning was Gary Muirhead, actually. Morning, Gary. Thank you very much indeed for being here. Hope you're fitting well. Hope Bonnie Scotland is treating you well this morning. I'm going to get my keyboard out the way so that I can lean, because, you know, I'm 2 hours into my day and I'm already tired. How are we all today? Nick Drew is here as well. Morning, Mark. Morning, all. I think that looks like he's got some weather as well. He's absolutely chucking it down here at the moment. Ken Hatcher has got, that's pretty much what my Apple app looks like, my weather app on my Apple iPhone looks like just at the moment. I've got rain basically from the beginning of the day to the very end. I don't care, I'm staying here. All I'm going to do is drink coffee and be sure I'm back here at 2:30 for our Instagram show. Dan Cohen's here as well. Morning, Dan. Thank you very much indeed for getting Peter McKenna to join the gang. Jim Turner says, morning, Mark and all. Tad damp on the wrong side of the glass. Yeah, I'm sure it is. I do have a slightly strange relationship with, I think it goes back to being a kid and going fishing with my dad. The weather never bothered my dad when we were fishing, but sitting under an umbrella so you're dry and cozy and warm while it's chucking it down outside, I've always quite enjoyed that. And even now, you know, if the rain wakes me up in the middle of the night, I'll quite happily lay on the bed and watch the rain fall, because I know I'm tucked up warm in bed. Same thing with the cab. You get yourself a nice warm cab and it's chucking it down outside. It's not a bad place to be. I'm just going through here. Lots and lots of comments. My question of the day was, what are your predictions for the year ahead, 2023? And I'm thinking not specifically here about personal ones. I'm thinking more about, you know, do you have anything specific? You know, are you expecting Caterpillar to launch a hover dozer between now and December 2023? Are you expecting some kind of revolution in the demolition industry, or whatever it might be? If you've got any of those, because don't forget, on Wednesday the 18th, 7 p.m. in the evening, we've got our prediction show. And some of the predictions, a good many of the predictions, will be mine, but I'd love to get some of yours on the show as well. So if you've got any of those, we'd love to hear from you. I'm going to say good morning to Peter McKenna again. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Peter, from the Liverpool docks. I'm sure the weather is damn fine up there. Bet it isn't. Mark Whiting's here as well. Morning, Mark. Thank you for being here. So many down. Let's have a look. Mick Norton says, good morning, Mark. Persisting down Here in Wakefield, yeah, I bet it is. Lots of weather. See, you can tell we are British, can't you? Because given the opportunity to chat, what do we chat about? We chat about the weather. Nick Drew says, question 8, impossible to predict. I think we're in unknown territory at the moment. Just got to keep our heads down and keep going. Pretty much what got us through the pandemic, isn't it, Nick? I know certainly this show wouldn't have existed without COVID-19. Or if it did, it would be in a very different format. But yeah, I think that's what we've got to do. I mean, I made myself a promise over the Christmas period. I think we've already got something of a first mover advantage here on this show because nobody as yet. There are plenty of podcasts and videos dedicated to all things demolition and construction, but nobody is doing it with the frequency that we are. Nobody is doing it live. I think we've got basically the arena to ourselves, and we're going to drive home that advantage, which is why we dropped 2 new episodes of 2 different shows yesterday. So Demolition's Greatest Threat, talking about embodied carbon, but also the Tech Foresights, the second episode of that, this one featuring JCB, talking all things hydrogen. And as I said at the start of the show, the folks at JCB seem to be enjoying that. As well they might. I mean, they were very welcoming while we were up there talking about the hydrogen machines. It's good to get behind the scenes and actually get down to the nitty-gritty of why they're pursuing hydrogen combustion over some of the alternatives. If you've got the time, go and take a look at that. You can find it on demolitionnews.com. You can also find it on our YouTube channel, and you could even find it over on LinkedIn and on Facebook as well. So go and take a look at that. If you would like to see the John Deere electric excavator, you can do so. I reported it literally as it landed. Interestingly, the company chose to launch it at the CES show in Las Vegas. CES stands for Consumer Electronics Show. So the very fact that there's a plant manufacturer demonstrating its capabilities in the field of consumer electronics, I think is telling. I think it was last year Caterpillar were exhibiting there as well. And if memory serves me right, I think Komatsu were also there as well. Very interesting to see the fact that the plant world is taking such a forward-thinking approach to all things electric and electronic and technology-wise, that they actually can hold their own alongside the Apples and the Microsofts and the Googles as well. So hats off to John Deere. And as I say, if that machine is on display, looking forward to seeing it. And just on the subject of that, I'm fairly sure. No, I'm not fairly sure. I am sure that Nick Drew has covered that one as well. So, Nick, if you're still in the chat, please post a link to your coverage of that electric John Deere excavator so that people can go and take a look. When I reported it, there were virtually no details available. Had some photographs and some outline details, but I think Nick may have a bit more on that. So if you'd like to see that, hopefully Nick will be able to post the link to that in the chat. So we're going back to Ben, the operator. Most youngsters nowadays don't want to work, that disrupts their social lives. They want 9-to-5 jobs, they don't want to graft. I was brought up in the haulage industry, and that's the same as construction. Hardly any young blood. Yeah, to be perfectly honest with you, I mean, I still partly agree with that. Although, this is a discussion we've had here on the show before. I remember my father questioning my work ethic. He was not a workaholic, but he was one of those that would work all the hours that God sends, primarily to secure the overtime pay. I actually used to laugh at him. You're going to work at 7 o'clock in the evening. Are you mental? And yet here I am, 30, 40 years later. I do exactly the same. Funnily enough, I then went on to question certainly my eldest son, Ollie, questioned his work ethic. He didn't want to work, he didn't want to get out of bed, and so on down the line. He is now one of the managers at a David Lloyd leisure centre, and is doing very well, and you can't keep him out of the place. He is a veritable workaholic as well. I think we overstate the failings of the younger generation a bit too much sometimes, and I think it's worth remembering. I mean, frankly, when I was 16, 17 years old, my social life also came first, not work. Work merely funded my my social life. But if you would like your faith in the younger generation restored, go and take a look at the full version of that interview. Ben, the operator, as I say, rising star over on Instagram. He spent a fair bit of time up with JCB. I think he did a week up there, but he's also been out to spend some time on one of their Pothole Pro machines. He's based up in Derbyshire, so JCB is very much a local firm for him. But if they don't snap him up as some kind of ongoing ambassador or Instagram influencer, then JCB are missing a trick, because people like Ben are the future. Go and have a look. Jim Turner says, "Tune." That was the video of the demolition from the point of view of the Dipper. I chose that tune, and Jim, when I choose tunes now, I tend to think of you while I'm doing it, so you can have that one on me. Ken Hatcher's advice for my time in Las Vegas: keep out of the lap dance clubs. The very fact that I'm taking my wife with me probably makes that it's unlikely I'm going to do that. A Dell concert looks good. Yeah, possibly. See what Caterpillar's got. JCB have a good stand as well. I'm not entirely sure JCB are going to be there. I need to check. I know they missed the last one. Not entirely sure what they're doing this time around, but I'm going to go and check immediately after the show. Employers could do much more to headhunt the Bens of this world and add them to the fantastic mix that is the construction industry. He portrays all the best about his generation: keen, enthusiastic, articulate, and in possession of the right work ethic. Yeah, and there's much more to Ben. If you watch the opening couple of minutes of that interview, we were originally supposed to be online discussing Ben's path to future glory at 11 o'clock in the morning, and he called me last minute and said, "Can we put it back to 1:30?" which I'm more than happy to do. I'm only sat here twiddling my thumbs most of the time anyway, and when he came on I said, "Any particular reason you had to put it back?" And yes, the reason he put it back was he'd just been for a flying lesson. 17 years old and he's taking flying lessons. Yeah, I was falling out of pubs at 17. I wasn't. No, I wouldn't encourage underage drinking whatsoever. It'd be a great thing what he's doing. What I notice is new operators look to get some money, as experienced ops and companies and agencies should knock their heads towards a rate per year experience. 1 to 5 years, under 14 to 18 pound an hour. 5 years, 20 plus, depending on what area of expertise. It's what the industry needs. I'm sure the younger generation would probably argue with that, and you know, given the fact that we are mid skill shortage, we are always mid skill shortage. If somebody is Ben's age and he can get paid full whack with just a couple of years under his belt, could you blame him? I certainly couldn't. That guy's good on that grab thing. That was a sheer, actually, but yes, he was very good indeed. Peter McKenna says, "I'm newish into the industry, but still deserve decent wages." I agree. Yeah, I agree. I don't have any objection to people being paid bonuses for productivity and that kind of thing, performance related. But if you've got your CPCS card, which young Ben has, and somebody else has a CPCS card, should that really make any difference? Interested to hear your chat. Yeah, you're right. The Hoover Dam is a good trip. I did that I think I did that on my second ever visit to Las Vegas. I think I'll have been there probably 10, 11 times this time around. But I did do the Hoover Dam trip. I also did, on a demolition trip, I did a ride out into the desert on some Harley Davidsons. I wasn't riding. I was riding pillion with one of the demolition guys. That's not a bad way to spend your afternoon either. I think there's going to be big changes in the construction industry, as it needs a good bloody shake-up. I certainly could not disagree with that. Jim Turner says, "Try lots of youngsters seem to be allergic to graft and long hours. I've seen a few exceptions though. My lad will be starting work this summer when he finishes school. He's got some growing up to do as regards getting getting thacked in, I don't know what thacked in is, and stopping until the job's done. I've had him on the tools and plant from about 7 years old, so I'd like to think he's a good stride in front of most 16-year-olds in the industry. Yeah, and again, I mean, when talking to Ben, again, I'd encourage you to go and give that a listen. He's actually been on plant since I think he was about 4 years old. His company have renovated houses, and he's been sat on mini excavators, initially just playing, but then as his enthusiasm has grown, he's done more and more of that, and now that is the path that he's looking to pursue. I mean, the very fact that his Instagram profile actually says he is looking to inspire the next generation. How many 17-year-olds would say something like that? What about 35 years? Yeah, what about 35 years? They don't pay me anymore, and I've got 34 years actually under my belt. My prediction for 2023 is that many more will pull the plug on electric due to the lack of infrastructure and incurred additional costs. So, let me tell you a story. Roll my sleeves up to tell you the story. I was planning to mention this over on Instagram later. The way that the industry reacts, the sharp end of the industry, you know, the guys that are at the working face like yourselves. I'm just going to very quickly say good morning to Ramon Perry. Morning, Ramon. Thank you very much indeed for joining us over on YouTube. I'm going to give you your welcome confetti just before I get on or get back to the story. Where are we? Confetti for Ramon Perry. Thank you very much indeed for being. Ramon, let me know where you're watching. I'm guessing you're, with a name like Ramon, I'm guessing you're watching somewhere Spanish speaking, in which case I hope you can understand what I'm saying, but thank you very much indeed for being here. Yes, so going back to my talk of electric, I tend to take a lot of lead from our audience. Not always. I know there's often some anti-Chinese equipment feeling. I don't have that. There used to be anti-Korean sentiment. I don't have that. There used to be anti-Japanese sentiment. Don't have that either. I've called out people that have been anti-JCB in the past. This suggestion that the machines are somehow less reliable. But I tell you what, I am starting to see some serious electric backlash over on Instagram in particular. As I said, and I'm going to mention this very quickly, there you are, that's John Deere coverage by Nick Drew. As I say, he has more details than me. I, as is so often the case, I was quick off the mark and maybe went a little too early. I'll leave you to do the maths on that. But I mentioned the John Deere electric machine over on Instagram, and bearing in mind that John Deere is a big deal, very big deal over in the US, bearing in mind that electric machines are very much the flavour of the month, I was expecting lots and lots of people to be saying what a fantastic initiative this was, what a great initiative by John Deere, can't wait to see it. The reaction was almost the complete opposite of that. It was questioning where the electricity is going to come from. It was questioning the way in which that electricity is produced. It was suggesting that the machines are too expensive, that they are not as work able as a diesel equivalent machine. And one of the biggest suggestions was it was only likely to be governments and local authorities that would buy them in any real number, purely to tick the environmental box, even setting aside the fact that the electricity that's piped into them may have come from a less than clean source. I find it really interesting. You know, we are a matter of a few years away from the demise of diesel and its replacement by probably electric at one part and hydrogen at another. And yet there does feel to be some really, really strong anti-electric sentiment out there. Be interested in getting your take. I know there's a few people here that are anti-electric. And I understand the objection, and I understand the fact that I think if we'd have done this maybe 5 years earlier, when electricity was that much cheaper, maybe the manufacturers would have made bigger inroads. But going back to our tech foresights, podcast with JCB. JCB launched its first electric mini excavator in 2019. It is now manufacturing those on 2 continents, and they are selling in 27 countries around the world. So JCB are doing it. Whether everybody is buying into it, not entirely sure. Another prediction for 2023. And says Mick Norton, increased pressure on the Construction Leadership Council, TLC, and the CSCS will drag them kicking and screaming to the table to force changes to drugs and alcohol testing for the sector. I would like to think that that would happen. Do I believe that it will? I don't, if I'm honest. I know you've got to be in your bonnet about all things drink and drugs related, Mick, much the same as I have. But this is not a new thing. This didn't happen yesterday. This has been going on in the industry. I mean, I've been reporting on it for a decade or more, and it's probably been going on an awful lot longer than that. And has the industry responded to that as yet? Nope. No, it has not. JCB had the Dancing Digger girls there years ago. They certainly did. One of my really strong recollections of Conexpo, and I wish I could remember what year it was, but JCB actually paraded some Union Jack liveried machines, including a backhoe loader, which I think is now in the JCB Experience Museum up at their world headquarters. They paraded them down the strip in Las Vegas, and it really was like the British are coming. Fantastic stuff. How about a pat on the back? Not sure what that relates to, but a pat on the back, Peter. Yep, more than happy to give you that. I actually think in the wider scheme of things, that's what the industry needs from time to time. We've got clients constantly berating us. We've got legislators constantly berating us. We've got trade bodies expecting us to jump through hoops. Wouldn't hurt to every once in a while just put your arm around somebody's shoulder and say, cracking job. Speaking of that, I dropped a line. There's a guy I watch on YouTube. A lot of what I do on this show is inspired by a guy over in the States. Guy called Craic. Wouldn't expect you to know him, wouldn't expect you to go and watch him, because I watch him to learn how to do this so that you can watch this, if you know what I mean. But I dropped him a line before Christmas, and it was one of those. It was just, thanks for everything you do. I've instigated some of what you've taught me over the years, the past couple of years. You've taught me how to do live streaming better. Just wanted to say thank you. Turns out I was actually watching him last night, and he called it out. And he actually said, he got to the end of last year, and I think same as some of us do, got to the end of the year and was starting to think, is it all worth it? Should I be doing something else? And apparently my email to him landed at just the right time, and he said, really gave him a bit of a kick up the rear end, ready for the new year. Why don't we do that more often? I remember when we launched the Demolition magazine, whenever that was, about 2008, 2009, I think it was, we launched the magazine completely out of anger and frustration. We launched the magazine and a bunch of advertisers, and one that really sticks in my head is Northern Track, Andy here up at Northern Track. Good morning, Andy, if you're watching. They hadn't seen the magazine. They didn't know what the magazine would look like. They didn't even know if the magazine would ever get off the ground. But they very bravely and very boldly backed the magazine with advertising. So after the first issue came out, all of the advertisers received a copy of the magazine, but I sent them a handwritten note as well. And I tell you what, I send out a lot of emails. I do a lot of this sort of stuff. I do a lot of stuff over on Instagram and on YouTube and everything else. The response I got to handwritten notes would blow your mind, because somebody had actually taken the trouble to say thank you, which I don't think we do anywhere near often enough in this industry and in life in general. Excuse me 1 second, I'm just going to... Mick Norton says, Dan Cullen, I like the idea of rates of play linked to years of experience for operators. The trouble is getting the operators to chronologically maintain a work log suitably endorsed by employers. But you'd think things like smart cards now, surely we would have a log of that, wouldn't we? To my mind, I listen. You guys are closer to the work front than the work face than I am, but I can see the idea of, the more qualifications, the better the pay. But as I said earlier, if you pass the same exam as somebody that's still on the same machine, should you really be penalised? And I realise it's a weird analogy to draw. If a 17-year-old passes his driving test, he is allowed to drive on British roads, the same British roads that somebody that passed their test 20, 30, 40 years ago is allowed to drive. Why would it be any different on sites? I'd like to get your thoughts. Jim Turner says operators and any worker should be paid on ability and conscientiousness. I wouldn't say age is that important. There's plenty of older crap operators out there. That's kind of my take. And the flip side of that, you could have somebody, straight out of school, 16, 17 years old, that has just got it. They just have a natural affinity with the machine and are immediately almost like a God-given talent. Why should they be penalised financially? Surely they should be encouraged. Heard the government is tightening up on giving planning for solar farms and onshore wind turbines, which doesn't really go hand in hand with them wanting us to lean towards electric plant and vehicles. I think one of the things that I find really interesting is the fact that there are some parts of the world, and I think Germany is very specific to that. Watching from afar, I consider Germany to be one of the more dynamic in terms of environmentalism. They were very quick to get underway, perhaps maybe not as quick as the Scandinavians and the Dutch, but they've been really pushing the environmental agenda for a decade or more, and yet they are kind of reverting to coal. A couple of former coal mines apparently have been reopened. They've been mothballed, but they've been reopened because there is a shortfall, and it remains, I know it's not popular, but it does remain a key source of energy. I'd be very surprised if the UK government did the same, but hey, listen, who the hell knows? With this government, it's almost impossible to predict what they're going to do next, isn't it? Mick Norton says one of the main objections to the imposition of mandatory drugs and alcohol testing is a perception by trade unions that it might lead to blacklisting. Discuss. It should lead to blacklisting. That's my take. If you are working on a construction site or a demolition site and you are in any way impaired, be it through drugs, alcohol, or anything else for that matter, you are putting your lives in danger. Excuse me. You're putting your life in danger. You're putting in danger the lives of those working around you, and you are quite possibly endangering the lives of people that are walking past that site. Why should you not be blacklisted? I think when I say blacklisting, I'm not saying about a life ban. Although I think if you are involved in an accident, particularly a fatal accident, and it turns out that one of the contributory factors was the impairment through drink and drugs, then maybe a life ban is probably not too far off the mark. But we've mentioned this before, and what I find remarkable, bearing in mind we do have smart cards and the stuff that goes with it. If I were to arrive on a site, where are we? 10:46. If I arrived on a site at 11 o'clock this morning to start my shift at 11 o'clock today, behind the controls of an excavator, and I was as high as a kite or as drunk as a lord, and the foreman found out that I was and sacked me, by 2 o'clock this afternoon I could be at work on another site. Is that right? I don't believe so. People break the rules more than 3 times should be banned for life, as they're an accident waiting to happen. Yep, 3 strikes and you're out. Maybe that's it. As I say, maybe it's 3 strikes and you're out, but maybe if your first strike actually hurts or kills somebody, you go straight past go, and you go immediately into industry jail. It's going to take a bold organisation to make that happen. And what I find remarkable is this whole drugs and alcohol discussion is the fact that I know demolition probably better than I know construction. So, we have demolition companies that will work alongside National Rail or in a petrochemical environment where drugs and alcohol testing are part and parcel of everyday life. And all the while that the demolition companies are working trackside or in those nuclear or petrochemical, they abide by those rules. They are regularly checked, they reach that higher standard, and they come away with an exemplary track record of having gone through dozens, sometimes even hundreds of drugs and alcohol tests. And then once they're finished with that work, they go back to general demolition work, and all of that is forgotten. Why not just stick with it? Surely that would make a lot more sense. And surely there is a USP there. I've been involved in tender submissions with demolition companies over the years, and one of the key differentiators that a lot of them use are the number of hours that they've clocked up without a reportable accident. Surely the number of hours they've clocked up without a reportable drugs or alcohol black mark would be a good thing to throw into the mix as well, wouldn't it? Doesn't seem beyond the wit of man to me. Jim Turner says drink and drugs are just too risky to be anywhere near plant. It's not worth risking other people's lives because someone can't be trusted to toe the line. Dead right. And I'm sure I said this at the end of last year. If you're driving a car and you are drunk, yes, you might be unfortunate enough to hit a bus stop full of people, and you might kill a few and you might injure a few more. We're talking pretty low numbers by and large. If you are driving a high-reach excavator and you are drunk and that excavator goes over, you could take out 10, 20, 50 people quite easily. If that lands in a busy street or something like that, you could take out dozens of people. And yet there seems to be this reluctance to apply the same rules that we all largely abide by on the roads. I don't know why there's a double standard. It makes no sense to me, particularly given the damage that a runaway excavator or a dozer or a wheel loader could do. And also, don't forget, we reported on it a few years ago. We've seen people. I think I described one as running amok. A guy apparently, I don't know the full details, but the guy had some mental health issues. Considered he wasn't particularly well treated by his employer. By all accounts, had a few drinks, and then decided to start attacking vehicles and other plant with an excavator. Would that have happened if he was stone cold sober? Probably not. I just think the risk is too great. And as I say, from a demolition or construction company's perspective, I would have thought that a great selling point would be able to say to their clients, we have a clean bill of health for drink and alcohol. We test regularly, and we are really, really conscious of this, so you can rely upon our staff. From a trade federation and trade association point of view, I would have thought that backing something like this would have been a great idea. They're very quick to jump on the bandwagon of mental health awareness. Not that counts for a great deal, but they're very quick to jump on that. Very quick to jump on women in construction. Why not jump on a bandwagon marked alcohol and drugs free? Let's have a look. Dan Cullen says, I think someone needs the bollocks to stand up and say, look, as an industry, we need to pull our fingers out of your arse and make changes to the industry and make it attractive to our future generations in all aspects. I agree, but the problem we have, and I think that's why I was so attracted to a lot of what Ben the operator was saying, was the industry is run by people that look like this. It's generally old farts in suits. Yes, we big up our apprentices from time to time. Once a year we'll have an Apprentice of the Year award, and we'll pick out a young person that did turn up on time for work and various other bits and pieces. But it's much the same as the current government negotiations over the pay of the NHS. They're speaking to unions, they're speaking to industry representatives. At no point is the government even remotely interested in speaking to the nurses, the people that are actually struggling to make ends meet. And I think we have exactly the same situation here in the demolition and construction industry. You know, there are young people that have joined the industry. Ask them why. Ask them how they heard about the industry. Ask them why they decided, I don't want to be a YouTuber or a professional footballer or appear on Love Island. I want to go drive a digger. Why did they do that? Take that information and use that to attract more just like that. There's an expression, success leaves clues, I think is the expression. So if you've got somebody like a Ben, and there are plenty more Bens out there, I just happen to pick one, but you pick a Ben, what made you decide, yep, that's the thing for me, and then apply that elsewhere? Mick Dalton says the trade unions rightly point out that as the card schemes are not statutory licensing requirement, they mean that for this very reason should not be linked to endorsements, bans, or indeed medicals. I totally disagree with the trade unions' viewpoint, but it highlights how difficult these issues are to tackle. Just because that is the situation at the moment doesn't mean it couldn't change. Think about what we have with the smart card. I wish I wish I could remember. If Fred is still in the chat, maybe he could look it up for me. I reckon 15, possibly even 20 years ago, I read a book written by Bill Gates, founder of Microsoft, in which he predicted that one day we would each carry a device that would open our front door, allow us to buy things. It would act as our passport, it would act as our ID, and so on down the line. It exists. We have smart cards. Surely those smart cards could also include details of additional training for the good side of things. Things like how well they work, and almost like a reference that goes from job to job and employer to employer, but also includes some of the bad. Like, we ended up having to part company with this guy because he was drunk at the wheel. What? Just because it's difficult doesn't mean it's impossible. And just because it's not statutory doesn't mean it shouldn't be done. And the trade unions, effectively what the trade unions are saying there, and but by default what they're saying is we would rather risk having drunk people than have a card scheme that reflects the fact that there are drunk people out there. It just makes no sense to me whatsoever. Too many people are stuck in their ways in this industry, don't want to make drastic changes, and wonder what would happen if they took back unions to construction. Yeah, well, I mean, I can't honestly see that going. And to be perfectly honest, I think the current situation with the train drivers and the nurses and anybody else that's out on strike, I think that's given the nation a bit of a glimpse of how the unions can affect things for the worse. As a former union person myself, there were plus sides, i.e. they got us more holiday, more pay and better conditions, but there were also downsides, and one of the downsides is trying to hold management to ransom over pay negotiations. I say all that despite the fact that I totally agree that the nurses should be paid a lot more money. I don't see, I think Margaret Thatcher and her cohorts pretty much broke the unions back in the late 70s, early 80s. I don't see that ever coming back. But with that being said, who speaks for the industry now? If you're a working guy, and listen, I had an instance a couple of years ago, had a phone call from a guy who wanted to remain nameless, who had seen a couple of the guys on his site, both using and selling drugs. And being the sensible person that I am, I said, well, can you not just report it to the site foreman? And he said, I would love to, but one of the guys that was actually involved in the selling was the site foreman. come lunchtime, they were around the back of the canteen, doped up to their eyeballs. So where do you go with that? And going back to the question mark about blacklisting, if you were to go over the site foreman's head and speak to project manager, client, even the managing director of the demolition company involved, and say, I've been on site and these guys are off their tits in one way or another, what's your employment prospects after that? You become a troublemaker, you could potentially be blacklisted, and even more than that, if you are blacklisted in that way, who's going to employ you? Despite all that I've said about competence cards and everything else, it's still not unusual for a demolition company to phone up a previous employer and say, we've got a guy here who wants a job, what do you reckon? And if all they've got to say is, don't employ him, he's a troublemaker, we've got a problem, haven't we? Precisely. Who can you actually go to as you ain't bothered clients to? Yeah, dead right. I wondered how many plant operators are fully paid up members of a trade union. Less than 250. Yeah, I would imagine the numbers are very, very low. Very, very low. And unfortunately, there is. I've talked about this from a demolition point of view. When you think about the Institute of Demolition Engineers, I think last time I looked, they were about 700 members. All of them are demolition engineers. So middle and upper management within demolition. If you look at the National Federation of Demolition Contractors, they're about 135, 140 members, and it is the company that's a member, but it is the principal of that company that is part of the NFDC. And there's about 140, but those are the very top of the industry. So if you take the NFDC and the IDE, there's maybe 800, 900, even being generous. There are 1,000 people that get together on a regular basis, chew the fat, put the world to rights, come up with ideas to better the industry and so on down the line. The UK demolition industry, again, estimated figures, employs something like 25,000 people. So there are 24,000 odd people out there, some of them very odd, but 24,000 people out there that have no central forum, no discussion platform, no way of putting their thoughts and their concerns and their hopes and aspirations, no way of having a say at all. Doesn't seem right, does it? Doesn't seem right. Dan Cullen saying HSE. Yeah, I mean, if you do spot somebody using drink and drugs, yeah, you could report it to the HSE. But as we've discussed in the past, particularly with our friend Mick Norton, what are the HSE going to do? My guess is that's considered outside their remit. The police won't want to know because it's a construction site. It's outside their remit, and the whole thing just falls through the cracks. Jim Turner says, people can't be left to do the right thing. That's why we have governments. People need rules to live by and punishments when they don't live by them. Yeah, absolutely. And the punishment should fit the crime. If somebody turns up impaired and potentially hazardous through their impairment, they should receive some sort of punishment. And it is a punishment that should mend their ways. It's no good giving them a slap. Go away and don't come back to work today. Go and have a long, hard think about what you've done this morning. Does that make any difference? Go and put your feet up in front of daytime TV. Is that a big punishment? Probably not. And Jim Turner's back again. No organisation federation will bring in compulsory drug testing because they know they'd be short of operators, and that would just push the rates up. Yeah. And one of the things that comes up so many times whenever I speak about this as a subject is there is this suggestion that no management within an organisation want to bring in drugs and alcohol testing for their workers because they know full well that some of them might fall short of any testing themselves. I find my job taxing enough to do with nothing more in my system than a cup of coffee and occasionally a bowl of muesli. Quite how you go about doing a day's work on site or off with drugs or alcohol in your system, Lord alone knows. They must have the constitution of an ox and have pretty much no regard for their own safety or the safety of those around. That's all I can say. Now, I'm going to call it a day here. We are going to be live over on Instagram at 2:30 this afternoon. I wouldn't be at all surprised if this conversation about drugs and alcohol were to continue over there. It is going to be completely off-piste, unscripted, just see where the conversation takes us. And if anybody fancies jumping on the show as a guest, they can do that, assuming they're going to talk about construction and demolition and that kind of thing. But yeah, if you'd like to see that, 2:30 this afternoon. Talk Tuesday, they call it. I don't know who they are. I came up with that name because it looked nice on a piece of paper. Talk Tuesday, 2:30 this afternoon. If you can't make that, fully understand, but please go and check out our YouTube channel. There's a bunch of new stuff over there. Go and check out Fred's Diggers and Dozers YouTube channel. Go and have a walk around the Bobcat stand at Balmer. Some fantastic machines and some great footage as well. And if all of that fails, I'll see you here 10 a.m. tomorrow for more of this. Till then, have a great day, everyone. All the best.